I've never been one to be superstitious. If I can't see it with my own eyes, I tend not to believe. And I'm not talking about religion, I mean the physical present. Before I go any further, I have to ask you a question. Do you believe in evil spirits, entities that roam the earth? If I had to take a shot in the dark, I would say that a great majority do believe. But although some are believers, you're shielded by the fact you don't have to see it. And in return, the presence of the unknown yields no fear. And if you have no fear, then it's obvious you don't really believe. And the reason why is because a soft lie will always be better than the hard truth. So I'll ask you again, do you believe in evil spirits, entities that roam the earth? I guess in a way, I was kind of lying to myself too, because I do believe. But like many of you, I've never seen it with my own eyes. And then I ran across this case, and in the window of the crime scene, I saw it. And then I realized that evil must dwell with those who live in the dark. September 10th, 1974. The world would make way for Meshon Cooper. She would be born in Oceanside, California. She would spend her early years here before making a transition to Kansas City, Missouri. In the year of 1993, she would graduate from Grandview High School, where she would continue her studies at Wichita State University. While in school, she would study child psychology. As time always does, it begins to fly by, and by the year of 2018, she would be 43 years old. By that time, she had lived a fulfilling life. She was a mother. She had even experienced a marriage. She's described as someone having a big heart. If you were someone in need, she was the type of person to give you her last. She was fun, outgoing. She was also a fan of any Kansas City sports team. Mishan was truly someone who was a light inside of a dimly lit room. With her confidence and bubbly personality, she garnered both attention and love from those around her. But sadly, a day would come when her joyous laughter could no longer be heard by those she loved. 43-year-old Meshon Cooper would go missing, and in the midst of the search, those who knew her would feel her absence. July 6, 2018. It would be on this day that Meshon's family would report her missing. Her family would begin to worry after repeated calls would go unanswered. There was also a family function planned, which she didn't attend. In light of her absence, they would contact the local police department, where they would begin an investigation immediately. The authorities would discover that she was last seen leaving her job. She worked at a Subway located in Overland Park, Kansas, which is a short drive from Kansas City, Missouri. This would prompt the police to interview the co-workers, but when they were questioned, no one knew where she was headed after work. In the beginning, it's not immediate cause for concern. She is, after all, 43 years old, a fully grown adult, and if she decided to take off for a second, well, that's her given right. With nothing leading to foul play at the moment, the authorities would continue their investigation, but they would tell the family, just be on the lookout, she'll probably return home soon. But for the family, they were worried, because this was completely outside of her character. She wasn't the type of person to run off, at least not without contacting family first. But with no real leads, they would be forced to wait on the investigation to play out, and on the next day, a discovery would be made. July 7th, 2018. The vehicle belonging to Meshon Cooper would be discovered inside of a park located at 7th and Myrtle Street. Upon first look of the vehicle, it didn't seem as if the vehicle was stolen. There was no forced entry. There was also no telling signs of a struggle. There was, however, one clue that seemed startling. Inside of the ignition were the keys. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out someone who goes missing doesn't leave their car with their keys still inside of the ignition and simply walk off. At that point, they knew something sinister may have happened. The investigation would begin to intensify. They would begin interviewing family and friends. They would also re-interview co-workers and try and see if anyone had a vendetta. But at the end of the process, no one could think of anyone who wanted to harm her. Everyone spoke highly of her. They would even rule out one of her ex-boyfriends. Without any evidence to point to her whereabouts, it seemed as if Mishan had simply vanished. While the authorities were hard at work with their investigation, the family would begin to share her photo on social media. But although her photo was seen by hundreds of eyes, no tips came in. Everyone was searching for Meshon Cooper without a clue to her whereabouts. Days would begin to pass in the investigation, and they were no closer to finding her. People were re-interviewed, and areas were researched, but it turned up nothing. At that point, authorities were waiting on cell phone data to come back. That way they could analyze her movement. Roughly 1 week later, the cell phone data would return, and they would get a hit on her last location. July 14th, 2018. On this day, they would get a ping on the location. Now, whenever you're using a GPS location, it doesn't tell you the exact spot the person may be in. It can only tell you a specific area. But when they looked in the area and began to run the backgrounds of the people who lived there, someone would stand out. The guy in question was 53-year-old Ronald Lee Kidwell, a guy who was a convicted felon. But it was his charges which raised a red flag. Ronald was previously convicted of violating a separate woman, and when the authorities heard this, their antennas would go up. With this newfound information, they would attempt to knock on the door and speak to the owner, but no one would answer. With no answer, they would go next door to the neighbor's home, and they would show the neighbor a photograph of Mishan. Turns out, the neighbor recognized her. In fact, they said that they had seen them speaking on multiple occasions. This was all the more reason to continue to try and get in touch with the owner, and they would. When the authorities showed up for a second time at Ronald's residence, he was present. He even agreed to speak to officers. The detectives would inquire about Mishan's whereabouts, but he would tell them that he had no idea, that yes, he knew her, but she hadn't been around lately. He was also asked why was her cell phone pinging from a location located near his home, but he also had no answer to that. He said he had no idea why. This interview would take place in the front doorway of his home. The officers were partially inside, but there was one weird thing. While interviewing Ronald, the detectives would notice the smell of a cleaning agent. The smell of bleach was so strong that one of the officers became nauseated. The officers would then transport Ronald to headquarters for further questioning, but unbeknownst to him, it was only a ruse. While he was being questioned, they were drawing up a search warrant. That same day, the warrant would be signed by the judge, and they would return to Ronald's home. They would begin their search in the living room and make their way to the bedrooms, but they discovered nothing. They would then make their way to the garage area of the home. Inside of the garage was your normal trash bin, but upon opening it, they would make a discovery. Located wrapped in several trash bags, they would find a set of remains. Fingerprints would positively identify the victim as 43-year-old Meshon Cooper. The search for her whereabouts was now over, but now there was a new question. Why? Why was Meshon Cooper found in Overland Park, Kansas, when she resided in Kansas City? What was her affiliation with Ronald? And finally, why would Ronald commit such an act? Ronald would be asked all of these questions. He would even offer an explanation. He told the authorities that someone else was responsible for what happened to her. He says that the person responsible was an acquaintance, and he was only guilty of driving her to his home and hiding her. The authorities weren't buying his story, but in the eyes of the justice system, you have to prove that someone committed murder. If they arrested him right then and there on the spot, the only thing that they could charge him with was tampering with evidence. So instead of charging him immediately, they would place him on a hold and haul him down to the local jail. While he's being hauled off to jail, the officers are now faced with a hard task, the task of contacting the family and relaying the bad news. The funeral preparations were set, and any and everyone who knew and loved her would attend. They would declare that Meshon Cooper was loved. They would also state the obvious, that whatever happened to her was unwarranted because she was a great soul. The family and friends would vow to receive justice and see that the person responsible is held accountable. The authorities would agree, and they too were set out for justice. But there was one thing that was missing: a confession that they were out to get. It wouldn't take long before 53-year-old Ronald Lee Kidwell was back in an interrogation room. By then, the authorities had collected even more evidence. Now faced with a mountain of evidence, he would roll over, and he would tell the authorities exactly what transpired. He would explain to the authorities that Meshon Cooper was someone that he had recently met, and he had befriended her. He says that Meshon Cooper was over his house one day, and they got into an argument. Ronald would admit to the authorities that he was HIV positive, and Mishan had threatened to tell everyone around him. He explains that after the threat, she hit him in the hand region with a knife. Ronald says that after being struck, he becomes enraged, and he begins to fight back. He says that he was using all the force he could. When he was done using his hands and his feet, he noticed the knife laying on the ground. He then picks the weapon up, and with one fatal swoop, he hits her in the neck region. He then goes to his garage, and he grabs several large trash bags. Once she's inside, he places that bag inside of the trash bin. He then drives the vehicle to the park, and he leaves it there. He has now admitted his guilt, and with his admission, he would be charged with second-degree murder.
Kansas City woman missing for a week has been found dead. The body of Meshon Cooper was found in a house at 69th and Flint in Shawnee early this morning. Ron Kidwell has been arrested and charged with second-degree murder in her death. He's being held on $1 million bond.
He has now given the authorities the why, what, when, where, and the how. But just when they thought they had the story wrapped up, something would happen. Ronald Lee Kidwell's child would come out, his own daughter, and she would provide a different motive. She says that she believes that what happened to Mishan was because the color of her skin. She says that her father would brag that he would befriend people of color just to harm them. With the information now being public knowledge, the authorities would investigate on whether or not they would upgrade his charges, but they wouldn't, because something would happen. When Ronald Lee Kidwell had his day in court, he had reached a plea agreement. He would show up to court and plead guilty to the charges, but not to second-degree murder. He would be allowed to plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter. For Ronald's role in this incident, he would receive a whopping 18 years. That's it, 18 and a half years. And due to him being sick, he might even get out earlier. But if you want the truth, this is a guy who never should have been walking around free in the first place. I mentioned earlier that he had recently served time for violating a woman, but it's more to that story. Like Meshon Cooper, she was also a woman of color, and that case seemed to be the same MO. He befriended her, and then while she was sleeping at night, he hit her in the head region with a weapon. After he does this, he violates her. He even admits to the authorities that when he did this, he was sick at the time. And for his role in this incident, how much time do you think he received? Well, it wasn't much. For his role in that incident, he would receive only 5 years behind bars. I've never been one to be superstitious. If I can't see it with my own eyes, I tend not to believe.
Mishan was a very loving, caring individual that would give anything to anybody. She touched a lot of souls.
I have to ask you a question. Do you believe in evil spirits, entities that roam the earth? If I had to take a shot in the dark, I would say that a great majority do believe. But although some are believers, you're shielded by the fact you don't have to see it. And in return, the presence of the unknown yields no fear.
But she definitely was the foundation, the rock of our family.
And if you have no fear, then it's obvious you don't really believe. So I'll ask you again, do you believe in evil spirits, entities that roam the earth?
I don't understand why a person would do this to such a beautiful soul.
I guess in a way, I was kind of lying to myself too, because I do believe. But like many of you, I've never seen it with my own eyes. And then I ran across this case, and in the window of the crime scene, I saw it. I saw it. And then I realized that evil must dwell with those who live in the dark.
Evil must dwell with those who live in the dark.
I find peace knowing, the last time that we spoke and the words that we had, that it was all positive.
I want to be extremely clear. The photographs that you just saw were non-edited. In order to see if we're on the same page, or maybe I'm just overthinking things, I want you to tell me what you saw. Be sure to leave your comments below. When it comes to this case and a clear motive, one has been provided, but I'm not sure if I'm buying the motive that he believed that she was going to tell everyone that he was sick. It doesn't add up. I truly believe that there's more to this story, a deeper issue, one that makes more sense to me, and this is clearly my opinion is, I believe he may have tried to make a move. If the words that came out of his own daughter's mouth are true, then maybe that was his way of getting back, trying to infect others. He went forward and she probably rejected him. What led me to this theory is what he did beforehand, his first case, where he only got 5 years. They say that once someone commits an act like that, they learn from it, and he knows his time is ticking, so maybe he didn't want to go back to prison. And the only sure way of making that happen is getting rid of the evidence. Again, it's pure speculation, in my opinion. And I'll say it again like I said it before. He should have never been free. The crime that he committed beforehand was enough to put him away for life, but he was spared. What would have happened if he was sentenced properly? Would he have been out on the street to harm Mishan? I guess that question is rhetorical. He was allowed to commit one more act, and with that act, he took a mother, a daughter, an aunt, someone who was truly loved. And while he was sentenced to only 18 years, the family was sentenced to a lifetime of pain. It's truly a heartbreaking story. It's all around tragic. Rest in peace, Meshon Cooper. Thank you for being a light for others.
I was a girl with dreams so wide, eyes full of wonder, heart open, untied. The world seemed soft, a place to lay. Ran through the days in the sun's warm sway. But somewhere along the road I felt the shift. The days turned happy like an unseen rift. The girl that I was began to fade, and in her place a new self was made. I'm in between, I'm not quite all, a girl, a woman, both in my soul. Learning to balance, learning to be in the struggle. I find the real me. I feel the pull of who I should be, caught between the past and what I can see. The weight of the change rests on my chest. Questions that made no sense. I was a girl with dreams so wide, eyes full of wonder, heart open, untied. The world seemed soft, a place to play. I ran through the days in the sun's warm sway. Somewhere